Hello and welcome to Into the Woods with Holly Worton. This podcast is all about our journey into the woods of ourselves, getting to know who we are, and where we're going in life so that we can create the life that we want to live. It's about deepening your connection with yourself, taking inspired action, and really trusting yourself and your intuition. It's also about mindset. Our beliefs are such an important part of this journey. And there are so many ways for us to change our mindset so that we can more easily live a life of expansive joy. This podcast is also about going literally into the woods and spending time in nature, and how that can help us on our own personal journey of self-knowledge. Thank you so much for joining us today. Now let's get into this week's episode. Hello, adventurers, and welcome to the Into the Woods podcast, episode 453. This is your host, Holly Worton, and I'm back with another solo episode. Today, I'm talking about motivation. Motivation is a topic that I think a lot of people struggle with, and this episode is inspired by a post that I saw on Instagram a while back, and I'll link to it in the show notes. But it said, no one is 100% motivated to go for a run 100% of the time. Instead of relying on motivation, you have to make running a habit. Identify your roadblocks, things that make it easy to say no to a run, and develop strategies to minimize them. Aim for consistency, not perfection. Start with a realistic schedule and mindset instead of an all-or-nothing attitude. And that got me thinking about motivation. I've been kind of reflecting on it in the background for the last, several weeks since I saw that post. So because this is a topic that people have commented to me on in the past, because some people see me as being a motivated kind of person, and I don't necessarily think of myself that way, so it's made me think about it. So that's been useful and interesting. So what are we going to talk about today? I'm going to talk about what is motivation, why is motivation important, what are those roadblocks, why do we get demotivated? I'm going to share some questions that you can ask yourself to get clarity on your situation and help motivate yourself, how to know what motivates you and how you're motivated, what to do if you're still feeling unmotivated after doing all these things that I suggest, and how to regularly check in with yourself. So, motivation. What is it? Motivation is a reason or reasons for acting or behaving in a particular way. And in the context of this podcast episode, it's the drive to achieve your goals or to meet your needs or to do the things you want to do. Why is motivation important? Because it helps you achieve your goals and do the things you want to do. It's pretty basic. If you're not doing something that you want to do or something that you need to do, then you might be feeling demotivated or unmotivated, and you might feel like you need to give yourself a kick in the pants and get motivated. But I think there's a lot more to it than just get off your ass and get motivated. That's not a very useful attitude. And I think a lot of people are either used to seeing messages like this or having this kind of self-talk that just gotta get off your butt and do it, and just force yourself to do it, and just force yourself to get motivated and fake it till you make it. And I guess that probably works for some people, but I think there's a lot more going on behind demotivation than can be addressed or fixed by that kind of attitude. So let's talk about why do we get demotivated? What are the roadblocks to motivation? What are the roadblocks to doing the things we need to achieve our goals? Sometimes our goals are wrong. And I think that's a really important place to start. Sometimes we've set goals for ourselves months ago, years ago, and we no longer really care about those things. And sometimes we still care about those things, but perhaps the reason why they're important to us has changed. So I'm going to talk about this in a bit, but it's really important to check in with your goals on a regular basis. Make sure you still understand whether or not they're important to you and why. So if your goals are wrong, you're not going to be motivated to take action towards them. That's pretty clear. A lot of times we have fears, blocks, and limiting beliefs that get in the way of our motivation and get in the way of us taking action to achieve our goals. So if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you know I've been doing kickboxing for years. was doing it on and off during COVID, but then for the last year I had a shoulder injury and couldn't go to class for almost an entire year. And I've been going back to class since January, and it's been rough. Like, I'm still not back to where I used to be. And I want to do my grading this year, but I'm starting to think, I don't know if I'm going to be ready. I don't know if I'm going to be ready by summer, and I don't know if I'm going to be ready by winter. I really don't know. So that started to get me to question this goal. Am I still motivated to do the grading? Like, it's a big thing. It's going to be hard. It's going to be challenging. And it's made me question whether this is still the right goal for me. And I've determined that it is. But I've also become aware that I have a lot of fears and blocks and limiting beliefs about my ability to achieve this goal and to pass my grading. And so I started working on my mindset around that using Psych-K, which I'll link to in the show notes, which is the tool that I use to reprogram my subconscious beliefs. And it's been absolutely life-changing to me. And I did a bunch of beliefs last week, and I've already seen improvements in my sparring based on the mindset shifts that I made. So that's good. It's very clear to me that I've got some fears in the way. And actually last night in class, our instructor gave us a whole little speech on fear. I swear I felt like he was speaking directly to me, even though he was talking to the whole class, but everything he said could have been applied for me. So yeah, I'm very aware of the fears and the crap that's getting in the way of that goal. And that is demotivating me. I mean, there are times where I think, I don't know if I feel like going to class because of fear. But the important thing is to become aware of those fears and then do the work to release them. Next, another reason why we get demotivated, lack of clarity. Sometimes our goals are really vague. And as I said earlier, sometimes our why has changed, or sometimes our why isn't clear, or sometimes we don't have a why, or it's just a thing we thought we should do. So it's really important to get clarity around our goals and the things we want to do. Like, why is this important? Why do you want to do it? How is it going to change your life? Because that's going to help get you motivated to achieve it. Or it's going to help motivate you to either drop the goal or change it into something that's more interesting and useful to you. Another thing that can get in the way of motivation and make us feel demotivated is perfectionism. So, I'll never be good enough. I'll never get it perfect. I'll never get it right. I'll never have what it takes. And that's very much related to the fears, blocks, and limiting beliefs, mindset thing. A lot of people have this belief, could be conscious or subconscious, that if you can't do it perfectly, then why bother? And perfection doesn't exist. So we're all imperfect. Even the people that win the races and get the black belt, none of us are perfect. So that's something that can be addressed with mindset work. Next is burnout and fatigue. Sometimes we're demotivated and we're not taking action towards our goals because we just don't have the energy. We're burnt out. We're exhausted. And a lot of us are still feeling this way after the last couple of years of pandemic and lockdown and in and out of lockdown and just the chaos of the last couple of years. So whether it's for that reason or for any other reason, if you're feeling burnt out or fatigued or exhausted, that's going to affect your motivation because you're probably not going to have the energy to do the things you need to do to achieve your goals. If you've got a race booked in the next few months and you should be training, but you're exhausted, it's going to be really hard to get out the door and do the training. And doing the training and forcing yourself to do it anyway is probably not going to be the best way to work through that burnout and fatigue. Probably going to make it worse. And finally, another reason, and this is not an exhaustive list of things that get us demotivated, but I think it's kind of the top 6, is mental illness. And I think it's always really important to check in with our mental health and well-being and to see if, maybe we're feeling depressed or anxious, or if we need professional help or medication to help with our mental well-being, because that can absolutely affect motivation. And again, there's no point in forcing yourself to just take action and do the things if what you really need is to address kind of more of a foundational aspect of your mental health. So those are a few reasons why we can get demotivated. And I think it can be really useful to just stop and evaluate your situation. Where are you right now? Ask yourself some questions so that you can get clarity on your current situation. Why are you feeling unmotivated? And you can break that down into some questions that you can journal or whatever's useful to you. So ask yourself, how do you feel about your goals? Review your goals, like either write out the list or go through wherever you have them listed. How do you feel about them? Are you excited about them? Are you kind of bored by them? Do you not really care anymore? How do you feel about your goals? And how are you feeling about life in general? Are you feeling excited? Are you feeling hopeful? Are you feeling exhausted? Are you feeling just like you can't be bothered to do anything? How are you feeling? And are your goals still important to you? Do they need to be adjusted in any way? Do you need to cross some of them off your list or just drop them or delete them? And for the ones that are still important to you or have been adjusted so that they are important to you, why are they important to you? Has your why changed? Is your why the same? Did you ever determine why they were important to you? Answer that question. And then ask yourself, are you feeling burnt out? Are you feeling tired? Are you feeling exhausted? Do you need rest? Do you need to stop and pause and recover before you move on? And finally, are you experiencing any signs of mental illness? Do you need professional help? Do you need some kind of support to help you with your mental well-being before you get back on track towards your goals? I think by journaling on those questions or just sitting and reflecting on them, that should give you a pretty clear idea as to where you are with your motivation, where you are with your goals, where you are with your life. And I think it's also useful to know what motivates you or how you're motivated. So there are two main types of motivation: motivation toward and away from motivation. So one is motivation toward what you want. So I am motivated to get my black belt. And then away from motivation is away from what you don't want. So for example, I've got my race this year in August, and when I reflect back on my training for last year's race, which went really well, and I had a great time during the race, a lot of the times what gets me out the door for my training now is, I had such a great time at the race last year. I want to have a good time at the race this year. So that's toward motivation. And I don't want to suffer during the race. So I've got some toward motivation, and I've also got some away from motivation. Like, I'm putting in the miles now so that I don't suffer during the race. I don't want to suffer. Like, I mean, it's a 100-mile race, so it's not going to be like bucket of joy, but I mean, it might be. It might be. That could be a limiting belief. But I'm expecting to have some ups and downs. But I don't want it to be just like a long slog of suffering. So I've really got a lot of away from motivation there. And both of these types of motivation are useful. But when you're reflecting on one particular goal, it's useful to make sure that you have at least one motivation toward. Because away from motivation is not directed toward anything. It's away from. So I'm motivated away from suffering, but what am I motivated toward? And that's pretty clear for me. I'm motivated towards enjoying the race and having a good time like I did last year. But if the only motivation you have is away from, it's really scattered. Like, you don't know where you're going toward. You're going away from something. You're running away. You're running away in your head. But you could be running like all over the place. It's not directed toward anything. So make sure you have at least one clear motivation towards something. Hope that made sense. So after you've gone through all these things, after you've reviewed, you've asked these questions to get clarity in your situation, you've identified what your roadblocks might be, you know what motivates you, you've got a clear motivation towards your goal. Here are some things you can do if you're still feeling unmotivated or demotivated. Set new goals if needed. Like, always question if your goals are still right for you. It is okay to give up on your goals. It is okay to throw away your goals if you have determined they are no longer right for you and your life right now. You can also put them on the back burner. You can also pause them and say, look, this year I can't handle this. Let me revisit this next year. There are so many ways of dealing with goals that aren't right for you right now. And just because a goal isn't right for you right now doesn't mean that it's not going to be right for you in the future. So send yourself an email that you like boomerang out into the future to come back at a time when you can reevaluate it or have some kind of system to do so. Next, get clear on your why. I know we've talked about this, but really get clear on why these goals are important to you. So my race this year is really important to me just because it feels like the next stretch, the next phase in my running. It's kind of an iconic distance. I felt so great about myself after my 100K race last year. And I'm just curious to see if I can do the next step. And I'm excited to see what it's going to be like. And there's so many whys. Like, I think it's going to expand my sense of what's possible for me, which is exactly what I got out of my 100K. And I just really like being outdoors. So I'm hoping it's going to be a great day on the trails. And the trail that I'm doing it on is very close to home, and I know half of it really well. And it's just a place I really enjoy running. So I have lots of whys. What I'm not 100% clear on is my why for my black belt. That's just always kind of been like my default goal ever since I started kickboxing. And I'm not really clear on my why beyond that. It's just like, well, I've been doing it for so many years and I've been doing all the gradings. And so the next step is the black belt. But I really need to spend some time journaling or like drill down into why this is so important because I'm not 100% clear. And I think that's why I've been wobbling sometimes. Like, I need to get clear on that. So get clear on your why. And if you're feeling exhausted, rest and recover if needed. Like, there have been a couple of times in the last month where I haven't gone to class or I haven't done my run or I've shifted it to another day because I was just really tired and I needed to rest. So rest and recovery could be just one day, could be a couple days, it could be a week, it could be longer. Depending on how burned out you are, you might need extensive rest, and that's okay. I often have felt bad in the past when I needed to rest, but the reality is it's just the kind way to treat yourself. And forcing yourself to go when you're burnt out or when you're injured is just going to make it worse. So give yourself permission to rest and recover if you need to. And in the same vein, give yourself permission to get professional help if needed. I think we're talking about mental health more and more often. It's less of a taboo subject than it used to be. Thank God. No one would look down on you for seeing a doctor for a physical problem, so no one should look down on you for getting professional help with your mental well-being. It's not a weakness. It's a really important part of life, being mentally well. So get help if needed. If you're feeling overwhelmed, but you do have enough energy to move forward, focus on just one thing. Pick one goal that's important to you, and then take just one step toward that goal. If it still seems overwhelming, break it down into a tinier step. Break your steps down into like tiny little like shuffles, and just take one little shuffle toward that goal and then repeat. I think part of the reason a lot of people get unmotivated and overwhelmed by their goals is because they have really big action steps, and those action steps need to be broken down into smaller chunks. Next, try something different. So maybe you've got this list of actions that you need to take to achieve your goal, but none of them sound exciting. You're totally unmotivated to do any of those things. Brainstorm some new ideas. What is a new action you could take? What's a different action you could take? There's probably other stuff you could do. And ask other people if you need motivation or if you need inspiration for ideas. And if you're feeling frustrated with your progress, remind yourself of how far you've come. That can be really useful. You haven't just started out on your journey today. You have a whole journey behind you. It can also help to surround yourself with motivated people. So surround yourself with friends, family who are motivated action takers. Maybe distance yourself from people who aren't if you can, if that's relevant, if that's useful. It can also help to get accountability and to make a goal public. I remember first talking about wanting to run 100 miles here on this podcast. It was a secret goal that I had. I had no intention of making it public. And then it popped out of my mouth and scared the crap out of me. So here we are. So I'm talking about it still because I made it public and now it's a thing. Sometimes it can help to get accountability. Sometimes people might think they don't need it, but it can be really motivating if you've made your goal public and you know that other people know you're going to be doing this thing. That can also work against you if, again, you get burnt out or have other problems that prevent you from working toward that goal. So you know you, do what works for you. Again, get help, get counseling, therapy, get a coach, do some mindset work, get whatever help you need. Talk to a friend, talk to a partner, and make it a habit. So this is such a generic topic or piece of advice, because that's making something a habit is a whole topic of conversation in and of itself. But I got out of the habit of going to kickboxing classes when I was injured. And it's been tough building it back into my life because its classes are in the evenings. I don't naturally feel like exercising the evenings. When I go for a run, I do it in the afternoon because that's when I feel like exercising. So I've had to make it a habit. I've blocked the time out in my calendar. I get myself out the door and I'm making it a habit again. But I've had to rearrange my life to make it a habit. And next, read your list of goals daily if it isn't overwhelming to you. So again, if you're suffering from burnout, probably don't want to do this. But if you've got the energy and you've got the time to work toward your goal or multiple goals, read your list of goals daily or write out your list of goals daily. One thing that I've been doing for the last month or so is I write out my list of goals. Was doing it daily. Now I'm doing it on a semi-regular basis. So my journal, on the left-hand page, I write my list of goals. And on the right-hand page, I make a list of belief statements that can help me to achieve those goals. And then I balance those using Psych-K. So belief statements are kind of like affirmations in the positive about what you need to believe or do in order to achieve your goal. And then I just do the work to program that into my subconscious. So that's a bunch of things you can do to help yourself get motivated. And again, getting motivated is not always about forcing yourself to take action. Sometimes it's about giving yourself permission to rest. So regularly check in with yourself. And I think there are 3 main questions. If we boil that list of questions down to 3 questions. 1, are these goals still relevant? 2, how am I feeling? And that's going to determine whether you take action or you rest. 3, what's one action that I could take to either move toward my goals or to rest and recover? That's super simple. If you're not feeling motivated, just go back to those 3 questions. Are my goals relevant? And then we've already discussed how to change that. How am I feeling? Do I need rest? Do I need action? What can I do to either rest or take action? Super simple. So, I hope you found this episode interesting and useful. Please drop me a line and let me know what you thought of this week's episode. You can email me at holly@hollyworton.com or find me on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or anywhere else and get in touch there. If you enjoyed this episode, you might want to check out one of these related episodes. Episode 450, I talked about adventures and endurance. 445, I talked about how to change the way you see yourself. 429 with Kelly Howard, we discussed breaking through internal barriers to our adventures. 418, I talked about adventures in rest. And 306, I talked about how to create new habits that last. So, you might find those interesting and useful. And as I've mentioned before, I'm finally accepting applications for podcast guests. If you're interested in being a guest, you can head over to hollyworton.com/pitch and fill out the form there. If you know of anyone who would be perfect for the show, please feel free to send them the link. And as a reminder, this podcast is about personal growth through outdoor adventures. I've had a couple of pitches that have been wildly off topic, so it kind of needs to be about outdoor adventures. It really needs to be about outdoor adventures. Yeah, I've had some wild pitches that are totally irrelevant. So thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a quick review wherever you listen to podcasts. And next week is 454. I talk with Carice Laguerre about adventures in breathing. So I've been doing a bunch of little videos lately for my private Facebook group for the Grove. So if you go over to, I think it's hollyworton.com/Grove, you can join that. But I've been sharing visits to trees and Avebury and different places that I go. And I'm aware in the videos that my breathing is terrible. I'm such a loud breather. And I know I'm a loud breather because my husband also comments to me about my loud breathing. So because breathing is such an important part of life and adventures and performance, I called on a breathing expert. And we talk all about different techniques and ways to improve our breathing and how to know if you're breathing right or you're breathing wrong, because there is a right way and a wrong way to breathe. And I have made some lifestyle changes since I did this episode. So I think you'll find that very interesting and useful. In the meantime, remember to visit hollyworton.com/453 for the show notes on this episode. Happy trails to you. Thanks so much for listening to Into the Woods with Holly Worton. You can find more information about today's episode, including links for topics that were discussed, at hollywworton.com. That's HOLLYWORTON.com. If you'd like to connect with other listeners and get support on your journey, I would love for you to join my private community on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Holly Worton. That's patreon.com/Holly Worton. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to seeing you next week.